Listen up, folks. Menard's summer indoor furniture sale is back, and it's out of this world. From comfy chairs, relaxing recliners, soft sofas and sectionals, and so much more, Menard's has it all. And it's ready for you to take home today. Visit the store and menards.com to get great deals on all of our indoor furniture while supplies last. Because once they're gone, they're gone. So don't wait and hurry in today.
Save big money at Menards.
Okay, forest animals, kids are coming to the forest, and it's up to us to make their visit a good one. Sparrow, have you practiced the most popular bird songs for the year?
Of course.
Catchy. I like it. River, how's the temperature?
It's a refreshing 52 degrees, man.
I love it. Turtle.
He's not here yet, man.
He's late every morning. Okay. Squirrel.
The forest has been preparing just for you. To learn more about cool things to do in the forest, visit discovertheforest.org. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service and the Ad Council.
We depend on our drinking water supply daily, but where does that water come from? Your water provider encourages you to get to know your local water source so together we can protect and preserve it. The investments we make as a community to protect our water source now ensure we have a sustainable drinking water supply for the future. Visit drinktap.org to learn more. This message is brought to you by the American Water Works Association and your local water provider.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for...
It's the Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket, 1430 AM and 99.5 HD2.
What's going on? It's the Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Tickets. And oh, man, it's a beautiful day. I woke up this morning. I took a few steps outside and I was like, I need a hoodie today. Oh, man, last night. So my wife and I, we've got this little chair that we live in this apartment. We got a little balcony area. We have this really nice, comfy chair that we put out there. I like to sit in it and read my books. And sitting down outside, Usually I can hang out shorts and a t-shirt. Not last night. I had to go back inside. I had to put socks on. I had to put a hoodie on because it was cold. Football season. It is so very close. It's starting to feel that way. Leaves aren't changing colors quite yet, but we are not that far away from it. And I just, cannot wait until those Saturday and Sunday mornings, feeling, the crisp fall air, watching football for hours. It is almost here, folks. I cannot wait for it. Now, something I could have waited for was this Colts and Bengals joint practice, because everything I've read, everyone I've talked to, texted with, it points to this idea that the Colts did not play very well yesterday. Here are Joe Burrow's total numbers. This isn't all 11 on 11, but, between 1-on-1, 7-on-7, and 11 on 11 against this Colts defense, Joe Burrow was 26 for 32 with 2 touchdowns and an interception. Ronnie Harrison had the interception. I think Jalen Jones came either he had a couple close ones where he couldn't keep his feet in, or he dropped them or something like that. But all in all, Joe Burrow had a pretty good day against this secondary. Yeah, not really what you want to hear. So I hear that, but then I also heard that during 11 on 11, the Colts defense, that was when it played its best. So during 7 on 7, that secondary struggled quite a bit. But when they got to 11 on 11 and the pass rush was on the field and they were getting after Joe Burrow, things went a little bit better for the Colts defense. Okay, and 11 on 11, the Colts defense didn't allow for the Bengals to score once. Okay, this first-team Colts defense kept the Bengals' first-team offense out of the end zone in 11 on 11. They did an entire red zone period, right? So, when you start inside the 25, your chances of scoring are pretty good. Not for the Bengals. Okay, so, and that to me is, if you want to be glass half full guy, which I'm kind of in the mood to be right now. Football season almost here. Colts preseason game number 3 is tomorrow night. I'm feeling good today, so I want to be glass half full guy today. Hearing that the Colts did not allow the Bengals to score a touchdown in 11 on 11, even though they did an entire 2-minute drill period to close practice and they did a whole red zone period, that is some of the best news that we've heard about this defense during the entire training camp. Okay, I think it's the best news that we've gotten, because the best defenses do 2 things. They get off the field on third down, and when teams get in the red zone, they hold them to field goals instead of allowing touchdowns, right? Not groundbreaking stuff here. When it comes to the Colts and their ability to get off the field on third down, I don't really like it. Just personally, don't like it at all, right? Because the secondary is bad, and if you're throwing the ball against this Colts defense, chances are you're going to do pretty well. So the question is, how are the Colts going to perform defensively in the red zone? Can they hold teams to field goals instead of touchdowns? In order for that to happen, this front 7, which there's been a ton of money and a ton of draft picks invested in, they have to be great. They have to live up to the money and the draft picks that they were selected with. And based off of what we heard coming out of this joint practice against the Bengals yesterday, it seems like they did, right? Because this is I think that the Bengals are going to win that division. Okay, I've got more on that coming up here in a bit, but this is a good offense that this Colts defense was taking on yesterday, and to keep them out of the end zone is a really impressive thing. Okay, so the defense, even though Joe Burrow was efficient yesterday, 26 for 32, they got stops in the red zone, and that is a big deal in and of itself. Moving to the offensive side of the ball. Brutal yesterday for the Colts. Everything that I read was that the offense was really bad. They apparently had one good drive where they got a couple first downs, and that was really it. Everything else was bad. Bengals players talking trash. Anthony Richardson doesn't throw to receivers. He just throws to spots, which is, that's kind of an issue, because if your offense is off timing, even just a little bit, you're in trouble. Okay, when you're throwing to spots instead of receivers. So that's something that we're going to have to see, our guy Anthony Richardson kind of evolve from. I think that's going to take some time, but we'll see. Hopefully, he improves and he can improve and throw to receivers instead of spots, because that is a concerning thing, right? If he's, can only function when the offense is on time. But we will see. Now, I got to be honest. I still have faith in this offense just because of the trust that I have in Shane Steichen to figure it out and to get this team to produce. I also don't want to overreact to what's happening in joint practices because you're not preparing for it, if that makes sense. You're not preparing, you're not scouting, you're not, prepping for your opponent for joint practices or for preseason games, right? So things look a little different when the regular season comes around and you're focusing specifically on your opponent, right? That doesn't happen for joint practices and preseason, so trying not to overreact too much. But Nick Cross, I think, had another good day playing alongside Julian Blackmon. Shane Steichen was once again asked about that safety position and what their plans are in terms of the season. Here's what Shane Steichen had to say on the safety battle.
Yeah, I mean, we're looking at all those things. That rotation back there with those guys, Nick Cross and Rodney and Ronnie and Trevor Denbo and Julian. I mean, we're looking at all that stuff right now. And like I said, the guy that makes the most plays here, we got another week and a half, before we start this thing off. And we'll make that decision when the time needs to be made.
They've already made a decision. I mean, they have. Okay, their first game of the regular season is 18 days away. Okay, I find it hard to believe that the Colts have no idea who's going to play back there yet. Okay, they know who's going to play safety alongside Julian Blackmon. And I'm here to tell you, it's going to be Nick Cross. The way that they've divided up reps, the way that Nick Cross has played, he's played pretty well in the preseason. Then again, it's the preseason, right? And it doesn't erase the 2 previous years of bad play from him during the regular season, but there's something to go off of. He's looked better than Ronnie and Rodney Harrison. I think that Nick Cross is going to be the guy playing safety alongside Julian Blackmon. But I do think they're going to flip them. I think Nick Cross is primarily going to play strong safety while Julian Blackmon plays free safety. I got to be honest. I have no evidence for this. Haven't read anything, haven't heard anything, haven't talked to anybody. But just in watching Nick Cross, he was originally drafted to play strong safety, and then they moved him to free. So, once again, no specific information on that, but just based off of how the Colts are playing him, how they played him in the second preseason game, I think we're mainly going to see him play strong safety as opposed to free safety. And, I got to be honest, it doesn't make me feel great about, the safety room for this Colts team, but Colts linebacker EJ Speed seems pretty happy about it.
Nick made some plays last game. I like how Nick playing. Ronnie, he's a seasoned vet. He plays well. I think we got depth at it as much as people think it's a problem. I think we got depth at it.
Yeah, EJ Speed, you're wrong. You guys do not have depth at the safety position. That's just absurd. Between EJ Speed saying that the Colts have depth at safety and Anthony Edwards coming out and saying that players in Michael Jordan's era and before him didn't have skill. Between those two statements yesterday, I think it's safe to assume that, we don't have to listen to players just because they play or just because they played. Okay, everyone with a set of eyes can see that the Colts have issue at safety, and everyone with a set of eyes that was alive in the 80s and 90s can see that basketball players back then had a tremendous amount of skill outside of Michael Jordan. Okay? Jeez, these players, man. The more I hear them talk, the more I want them to stop talking. You know what I mean? I mean, it's just nonsense. Nothing but nonsense spews from their mouths. Something that was not nonsense, though, came from Shane Steichen yesterday. He was asked about playing the starters on Thursday. Here's what Shane Steichen had to say about his plan in letting the starters play.
Yeah, our starters will play about a quarter and a half, probably, give or take. I mean, some guys might play less, some guys might play more, but want to get those guys out there and run around on Thursday night.
You're going to see the third one now is kind of what the old third one was?
A little bit. I think this year kind of played out similar to last year for us as far as how it all worked out. We had a joint practice week 2 last year against Chicago, and then we had a joint practice against Arizona, and then we turn around and we have the Thursday night game again. You know what I mean? So after this Thursday night, we got 17 days until we kick off against Houston. And So this is a big day. So shoot, we got to get the players ready to roll and go out there and play and get that game-like experience before obviously week 1 gets here.
That was Shane Steichen talking about playing the starters. They're going to play a quarter and a half on Thursday and kind of how he views that third preseason game. I like this. I'm a fan of this. I like that he's going to play the starters. Here's the big thing, though, right? Because, everyone knows what's coming next. Expectations. What do the Colts need to do for us to feel better about them? If they do this, are we going to feel worse, right? All that stuff comes next in this conversation that you and I are having. The Bengals starters aren't playing. Charlie Clifford, a guy who, covers the Bengals, came out, tweeted yesterday, the Bengals starters will not play on Thursday. That means that the Colts starters for a quarter and a half are going to play against the Bengals backups. Look, I think the Bengals are going to be good this year, one of the better teams in football. I think they're going to win the AFC North. All that good stuff. But these backups, nowhere they shouldn't touch the Colts starters. Okay? The Colts need to look awesome. Okay, I want to see the Colts, first and foremost, be on the same page on the offensive side of the ball. Throws need to be on time. They need to be on target. The offensive line needs to protect Anthony Richardson well. And when they run the football, the offensive line needs to get a push. Okay, that's really the thing that I'm looking at, right? Because there's, a lot of concern about how's Anthony Richardson going to look. What about the receivers? How's A.D. Mitchell? Alec Pierce? Has he gotten any better? Like a lot of the focus this offseason, and rightfully so, has been on these skill position guys for the Indianapolis Colts. Here's the thing, though. Here's the thing. If this Colts offensive line is bad, none of it matters. And if this Colts offensive line is good, then none of it matters. Okay, like this Colts offense is going to live and die by this Colts offensive line group that Chris Ballard has put together and has kept together for the last 3 years. And if they can't protect Anthony Richardson against a bunch of backups playing against the Bengals, then that's going to be concerning. If the Colts offensive line can't generate a push for Jonathan Taylor to run behind, then against a bunch of Bengals backups, then that's going to be concerning. Look, if Anthony Richardson has, an off day and starts to throw the ball, I'm not going to be worried. But if the offensive line can't block the backups for the Cincinnati Bengals, I will be highly concerned about how this Colts team is going to look heading into the season. Okay, I expect and need to see this Colts offensive line be dominant tomorrow night when they go on the road to take on the Cincinnati Bengals in the final preseason game. Okay, I want to see that offensive line dominate. And I think that if that happens, everything else will fall in line. We'll see Anthony Richardson throw the ball well because he's being protected. We'll see Jonathan Taylor run the ball well because there's good blocking, right? Which then leads to everyone else having a good day. Okay, A.D. Mitchell catching some balls. Anthony Gould making a few grabs. Michael Pittman Jr. making some grabs. Okay, but it all starts up front with this Colts offensive line that we have been repeatedly told is supposed to be awesome this year. So I want to see that from them. When it comes to the defense, I just want the defense to look like it can hold its own. Okay, I don't want to see Bengal receivers running open consistently. Okay, I just want to see guys be covered. And I'm intrigued to see how Gus Bradley calls the defense on Thursday night. Because I think we're going to see one of two defensive approaches from Gus Bradley. Because, as we all know, this Colts secondary, not very good. It's horrendously bad, okay? It's amongst the worst in the NFL from a personnel standpoint. So I think that when you have a defense this bad and you lack this much talent, I think defenses do one of two things. They are either incredibly passive or they become incredibly aggressive. There is no in between, right? Great, talented defenses, you can kind of mix and match. You can do a little bit of both. I don't know if that's really an option for the Colts this year because the secondary is so bad. So I think we're either going to see the Colts commit to trying to make teams, run 12 plays to score touchdowns. So a lot of we'll give you underneath stuff. We're just not going to give up any big one-play touchdowns. And if you can, convert, 10 plays in a row, and that's what it takes for you to score, then okay, hey, we'll concede that. I think we'll either see them take that approach or we'll see them blitz and gamble in hopes that negative plays can help them get some stops. That's what the Minnesota Vikings did last year with Brian Flores as their defensive coordinator. And, it helped them get stops from time to time. So I'm interested to see how the Colts go about trying to stop other teams despite having a lack of talent on the back end of their defense. Loaded show for you. Jared Dubin, CBS Sports, he's set to join me here in about 4 minutes. And then Zach Pereles, top of the hour, 11 o'clock. He's joining me as well to talk a little NFL, Caitlin Clark, all that good stuff. But Jared Dubin coming your way here in about 4 minutes.
Often imitated, never duplicated. It's the real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Tickets, 1430 AM and 99.5 HD2.
What's going on to the real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket? And I've got Just a loaded show today. A lot of football coming your way. Joining me now to talk about that football, Jared Dubin of CBS Sports. Jared, what's going on, man?
Not too much. How about you? How you doing?
Man, I'm doing really well. I was talking to you off the air. It's cold here. I had to wear a hoodie into work. I had to wear a hoodie last night when I was reading on my balcony. Football season, man, it's coming, and I can't wait for it. I'm so ready.
Oh, yeah. I mean, look, we got, 2 weeks until games start? It's getting ready for fantasy football draft season, getting ready for, these last preseason games that nobody's going to play in. So let's get ready.
Except for the Colts. The Colts are running their starters out there for a quarter and a half. And I already know you don't like that, I'm assuming.
No, I'm generally pretty anti playing your starters in preseason because only bad things can happen. I do understand it from their perspective because Richardson only played in essentially like 2.5 games last year, and he only had 13, 14 starts in college. So I understand wanting him to get him some work, but I still would err on the side of extreme caution.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you. I understand that they want to get him some work. I would rather it happen in preseason week 2 though, just because you have that extra week of if someone does, sprain an ankle, break a finger, you have that extra week to kind of recover from that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. That tends to be what most teams do that do play their starters is they play them in that second to last preseason game, and then the last one is guys that are just trying to make the team. But yeah, I mean, again, from the perspective of he really just hasn't played a lot of football, I understand, but I still probably wouldn't do it.
Yeah, I totally understand that. And that kind of seems to be the way that a lot of these coaches are starting to operate. Sean McVay showed up, didn't play his starters the whole preseason, started the season 8-0, and everyone was like, what's dumb? Playing your starters in the preseason. And then that's kind of what everyone does now. Joined by Jared Dubin of CBS Sports. You wrote an article yesterday about Cardinals quarterback Kyler Murray, and it seems like he looks good. We had a guy come in here who was at Colts and Cardinals joint practices and said the total opposite. I don't know. I haven't kept up with the Cardinals much this offseason. So what are kind of the reports coming out of Arizona on Cardinals quarterback Kyler Murray?
Yeah, I mean, look, you can go to one practice and see something very different from what someone else sees in a different practice. I went to a Giants practice a couple weeks ago where, Daniel Jones really did not look good, but the people who were there the day before were like, oh, he looked much better yesterday. It's sometimes you have good days, sometimes you have bad days. Jonathan Gannon, the head coach, was the one that's saying that Kyler looked really good. Now that might have just been, physically, because last year at this time he was rehabbing from the torn ACL, but I thought he looked pretty decent when he came back last year. He obviously wasn't fully himself just yet, but we've seen throughout his career, he has the capability to play at a really high level. The issue has just been staying healthy, especially toward the end of the season, because, given the amount of running around and punishment his body takes in terms of, the scrambling and in the pocket, because their offensive line hasn't been very good for most of his career, that has sort of led to him wearing down toward the end of the year. But the talent is there. There's no question about that.
Yeah, he's really good. I think that the size kind of throws some people off because, look, when you look at the history of the NFL, most quarterbacks that have success are 6'3" and they're really big. And, let's be honest, Kyler Murray looks like, a 12-year-old out there sometimes because he's just so much smaller than everyone else. But I think what we've seen from him has been really good. I don't think he's ever had a great head coach out there in Arizona. Cliff Kingsbury's fine, I guess. And he won games with him as his head coach. I really like Jonathan Gannon. So we'll see what they look like this year. Are there any teams that you kind of have on your radar that you're expecting to make a bit of a jump from last year?
A jump. I mean, the Bears are an obvious one. They finished last season not all that well, and they just have such an upgraded group of skill position players, especially. And they'll have, Montez Sweat for the whole season. I think their defensive backs are really good. Jalen Johnson was awesome last year. Tyreek Stevenson, after a bad couple games to start the year, was really, really good after that as a rookie. I would go the Bengals just due to, reversion of injury luck. And, the Falcons, you would think, have to get better as long as Kirk Cousins is on the field.
Yeah.
And, the Jets, the same thing. Even though I'm not particularly high on them, they should be quite a bit better than last year, if only because you really can't be worse offensively.
That's very true. Once again, joined by Jared Dubin of CBS Sports. Yeah, I'm with you on all those. The Bears are fascinating to me. I think I like Matt Eberflus. I know there's some mixed kind of feelings on him just from, the fan base and from football fans in general. I think that as soon as he got a real pass rusher in Montez Sweat, that defense became a lot better. What are kind of your feelings on him being the head coach of the Bears?
Yeah, I like his defense. As a Cowboys fan, he was the linebackers coach in Dallas, and he was very highly thought of. And I remember that when he went to Indianapolis to be their defensive coordinator, and then that defense became pretty good pretty quickly. In terms of head coaching, I think there is a little bit more responsibility of like game management and, aggressiveness that I would like to see more from him. And I don't think that their offensive coordinator choices have been particularly inspired. And I feel like when you're a defensive coach, it's really important to get that right. And I don't think they have so far. So I'm sort of two minds about it, where like I think that when he has good enough players, he can build a good defense, but some of the other stuff I think is a little bit lacking.
Okay. Yeah, that totally makes sense. You mentioned that you were a Cowboys fan. So now I have to ask you, what's going on with CeeDee Lamb? Are you nervous at all that they aren't going to resign him or extend him? Excuse me. It's like what's your feeling around the Cowboys this year?
The Cowboys always do this to themselves. They don't do their work early and somehow blame it on the salary cap, even though every other team in the league manages to get their stars signed pretty much as quickly as possible. Like, they should have signed CD to an extension the moment he became eligible last offseason. Micah Parsons should have had an extension at 301 when free agency started. Dak Prescott should have had an extension last offseason. And if you weren't going to do that, and if you weren't going to do it this offseason especially, then you had to approach him at the start of the offseason and be like, let's work on a trade, get you somewhere that you want to go. Because at this point, there's really no reason for him to sign an extension whatsoever. He has all the leverage he can get to unrestricted free agency because he has both no trade and no tag clauses. And he's just going to make an absolute, like, the money that he's going to get on the open market is going to be, like, I can't even think of the right word for it because it's so big.
Astronomical.
Yeah, astronomical. Yeah. And look, they do the opposite with the players that they shouldn't extend. They give Zeke Elliott, a 6-year, $90 million deal when he's holding out after year 3, despite the fact that at the same time, that was Tony Pollard's rookie year. And they were talking him up as like the next coming of Alvin Kamara in training camp. And they were right. And they still paid Zeke Elliott at the time. And they did the same thing. They paid Jalen Smith after one good year. They paid Lyle Collins. They pay the wrong guys at the wrong times, and they pay them at the top of the market. And they don't do it with the actual superstars who are the best players on the team. It really just does not make any sense on any level. And they already did this with Dak the first time around and cost themselves, millions upon millions of dollars.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Like I'm a big believer in, look, when you draft good players at important positions like pass rusher, quarterback, wide receiver, you extend them as soon as possible, because by extending them quickly, you in turn save a little bit of money, right? Because like
the price does not go down. They seem to be under this delusion that the price will go down for CeeDee Lamb or Dak Prescott. That is never going to happen. The price of the brick always goes up, as Morlow said.
Even if they're bad this year, like seriously, like even if the even if Dak Prescott's bad this year, that the number isn't going down. Like because like you said, if he goes out on the open market, the Raiders will pay him whatever they need to get him to come there.
And so you're exactly right. And if you pay him early, instead of paying him $60 million a year, you pay him, 56 to make him the highest paid guy, and you save yourself $4 million bucks. You can go grab, a solid player or a solid backup with that money.
Absolutely. And again, they did the same thing the last time. Like, it just makes no sense really on pretty much any level. There's not much more to say about it than that, because it's a recurring pattern. If it was just one time with this kind of stuff, you'd be able to say, all right, they messed this one up, but they consistently mess this stuff up.
They do. It's, for me, not being a Cowboys fan, even though I am an Arkansas fan, so there's a part of me that wants to see Jerry Jones succeed. It's kind of funny to watch from a distance. I'm sure it's not great for you though, being a fan.
I mean, it's funny and frustrating at the same time. Like, it is funny that they're so inept at this, but it's kind of annoying as someone who is, because of my dad, emotionally invested in this kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's totally fair. Joined by Jared Dubin, writer for CBS Sports, talking a little Cowboys. So I have this list of 4 teams that I'm going to put out a little bit later of NFL teams that I think are going to take a step back this year. I almost put the Cowboys on my list. I didn't, but just after this conversation with you, I feel like I should have.
Yeah, I mean, I think you could certainly make an argument for it. Like, it didn't look like they did all that much to get better this offseason. They let a bunch of starters go, and for the most part, didn't really replace them with guys that you can expect to definitely be better. Now, I think one thing that's happened since then is that the 2 rookie offensive linemen that they drafted have looked pretty phenomenal in apparently in both training camp and what we've seen in the preseason games. Tyler Guyton in particular, who, I'm just going to learn to stop doubting the Cowboys on first-round offensive linemen. I was, not in favor of the Tyler Smith pick a couple of years ago, because I thought they wanted to play him at tackle eventually. They did play him at tackle his rookie year, and he was pretty good. And then last year, he was a first-team All-Pro at left guard. And Tyler Guyton was like the one guy I was like, not again with another raw tackle. And of course, apparently he looks like he's really good too. And then Cooper Beebe, who they're moving from guard, where he played at Kansas State, to center. Apparently there were some struggles with snaps early in camp, but that's been cleaned up of late. And then he moved into the group with the starters recently in camp, and has been apparently quite good. I'm not out there at Oxnard or in Dallas to see that kind of stuff, but with the offensive line potentially being as good or better than it was last year, I guess they're sort of hoping that the defense under Mike Zimmer can outperform what it did under Dan Quinn at the end of last season. At the beginning of the year, they were, absolutely annihilating everybody and scoring touchdowns left and right. Down the stretch of the season, they were like 23rd or 24th in defense in the last 5-6 games. And then obviously they got completely torn apart by the Packers. I definitely can see the argument for them taking a step back just because of all the ridiculousness around them. I do think it's kind of hard for them to be legitimately bad, though, when you have Dak and Michael Parsons and CeeDee Lamb and Trayvon Diggs and Zach Martin and Tyler Smith and Deron Bland. Like, it's hard to be a bad team.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Once again, joined by Jared Dubin of CBS Sports. If you head over to cbssports.com, you can read all of his stuff over there. Two more questions for you, Jared, and I will let you go. So I've just noticed that when all the really good quarterbacks end up in the AFC, NFC teams wind up with these higher draft picks and they rebuild a little bit quicker. It feels like the Eagles and the 49ers over the past 2-ish years have really felt, well, maybe not last year for the Eagles, but for the 49ers especially, they've just kind of felt heads and shoulders better than everyone else. That doesn't really feel like the case this year. What do you think we're going to see from the NFC from a competitive standpoint, especially heading into the playoffs?
I mean, I do still think the Niners, at least, are sort of head and shoulders better than the other teams in the NFC. Just, there are teams that have offenses that could be as good, and there are teams that have defenses that could be as good. But I don't think anybody comes all that close to having both units that can be as good as the 49ers. Like, that offense, especially when, Ayuk, Debo, Kittle, and McCaffrey are all on the field, it's basically like unstoppable. It was one of the, 20 best offenses of this century, which is, completely ridiculous. And then the defense, last year there were some struggles with, the new defensive coordinator, Steve Wilkes, whose defense was, quite a bit different than what they had been doing under, Robert Saleh and then D'Amico Ryans. And now they're going back to, sort of an in-house defensive coordinator that they promoted through the system in the same way those guys were. And I think they'll be a little bit more solid on that side of the ball. And obviously they have stars there too, Fred Warner, Nick Bosa, Charvarius Ward, their safeties. One of them has broken out in each of the last 2 years, and Talanoa Hufanga and then Jair Brown last year. Like, there are just stars at every level of that defense, and obviously we know the offense is like a Death Star.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm a little worried about the 49ers. I thought they had really good injury luck last year. McCaffrey's a year older. I'm not a Brock Purdy believer. I feel like if they lose any one of those, Debo, Ayuk, or McCaffrey or Trent Williams, who's 35 years old, the oldest player on their team, I'm a little just kind of concerned about them from a health standpoint, because a lot of their better players just tend to not stay healthy. And are they really going to stay healthy 2 years in a row? That's my kind of concern about the Niners this year.
Yeah, I think that makes a good deal of sense. But my thing about Purdy is you don't have to be a big believer in him as an elite quarterback to get fully behind the Niners. Like, we've seen Kyle Shanahan scheme up really good offenses with significantly less talented quarterbacks. Like, he is going to, be the rising tide that lifts all boats, especially with that group of skill position players. And, Purdy has been, despite not being the most physically talented quarterback around, one of the, 4 or 5 most efficient quarterbacks in the league. And, with really explosive plays mixed in, I think he led the NFL in yards per attempt last year. Like, he doesn't have to be the most talented player to be, one of the best quarterbacks in the league just because of everything around him.
Yeah, that's very true. Like you said, it's kind of like the Richardson bet. Like, if you think Anthony Richardson's going to be good this year, it's, at least the people I've talked to, it's usually because Shane Steichen is the head coach and not because, Richardson's some amazing player. I think it's the same thing in San Francisco. But I don't know. I felt like when one of those guys were out last year, whether it was Williams, Ayuk, Debo, whoever, it just felt like that offense went from being, like you said, one of the 20 best offenses of the century to being, still good, but not overwhelmingly great to where it feels like it's hard to find an answer to stop them.
Yeah, I think that's true, especially when you remove someone like Debo, who is just such a unique player and just does so many things that almost nobody else can do. And when you remove McCaffrey too, just because of the pass catching threat that he is out of the backfield, he averages the most receiving yards for a running back since like the 1950s when everybody was listed as a running back. Like, it's pretty ridiculous the kind of threat that he is out there. They just have so many different guys that can create explosive plays. And when you have all of them out there, it's almost impossible to stop. When one or more of them is either out or banged up, then it just becomes, sort of a really, really good offense, which there's a difference between that and what they were operating as for a lot of last season. And that difference can be pretty meaningful.
It definitely can. Last question for you, Jared, and I will let you go. So you also cover basketball on your own last night in basketball.com for everyone who wants to go and check out his stuff there. I'm assuming you saw what Anthony Richardson said about the players in the 80s and 90s just not having any skill outside of Michael Jordan. I know it made a lot of people upset. What did you think when you heard that?
Yeah, I thought that was pretty ridiculous. I do think he's directionally correct in that the league is more talented now than it was then. Like, for some reason, basketball is the only area of life that people try to tell you was, more advanced and better in the 80s and 90s than it was now. Like, technology is better, everything about the quality of the things that we have is better. Maybe not, life itself in certain ways, but the players are unquestionably more talented now than they were then. That's pretty easy to see. But the idea that nobody had skill in the 80s and 90s, like, go tell that to Hakeem Olajuwon or, Penny Hardaway or Jason Kidd or, so many other guys, Clyde Drexler, Magic, Larry Bird. Like, there are so many guys that were so talented. Just because the guys now, as sort of a baseline level of talent, or the, median level of talent in the league is higher now, doesn't mean that those guys were, not any good.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. So growing up in non-basketball months, we had NBA TV, and I would come home from school and I would record all of the hardwood classics games. And so,
Oh,
like,
yeah.
even though I'm, a little bit younger than some other people that cover the sport, like, I've seen a lot of those guys play. I remember reading it. I'm like, this dude did not watch old VHS tapes of games
He
growing up.
even said that in the quote. He was like, I didn't watch, so I don't really know, but those guys weren't talented.
That's exactly right. And and look, the depth in the league is better now than it was back then, but like the top end guys, I don't think there's been that much of an improvement at like the top end of the league.
Yeah, I mean, I would say again that like the level of actual basketball talent is probably higher. Like dudes just get better. There's so much more technology available. The diversity of skill, especially, is much different now than it was then. Like you have centers that are basically point guards. That was not really something that existed, with the exception of like Arvydas Sabonis and Bill Walton back in the day. So it's a little bit different now than it was then. And just the skill sets in general are different, mostly because the rules are different. Like you can't play basketball now the way you did in the 90s. Zone defense was literally illegal until the early 2000s. You couldn't play basically any style of defense that's currently played in the NBA was illegal in the 80s and 90s. You weren't allowed to play defense like that. So it's obvious that the skill sets that the players have evolved to go along with the way the rules work.
Yeah, and the pool of which they pull players from is much larger as well. Like it's a global game now. Like, you're pulling guys from Serbia and Europe. Like, oh, Serbia is in Europe, but really all of Europe. Whereas like, in the 80s and 90s, most of the league it was filled with American players outside of guys like Elijah Wan and and Sabonis. And so like when you're pulling from a larger pool, like the league should be better.
Yeah, I did actually a story on that exact topic last year for ESPN.com about sort of the internationalization of the league, and especially of the top of the league, looking at, the history of MVP votes and when international players started getting votes and when they really started taking over the MVP votes, which, we've had now 6 years in a row with an MVP from a country other than the United States. And it doesn't look like, Nikola Jokic or Joel Embiid or Giannis Antetokounmpo or Luka Doncic or Shai Gilgeous-Alexander or Victor Wembanyama is going anywhere anytime soon. So it's going to take, a pretty special performance from one of these American guys to bring the MVP award back stateside. And the level of talent is just so much higher because of that.
It really is. And it makes for a much, much better league. Jared, thanks for your time, man. You were great as always.
Thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it.
You got it. That is Jared Dubin of CBS Sports. You can find all of his stuff on cbssports.com. Follow him on Twitter at JADubin5. I think that's his @ something like that. And yeah, you can see all of his articles there as well. He's got a link to his basketball coverage in his bio. Great guy, great stuff. Coming up in 4 minutes, I've got some NFL teams that I think are going to regress. I'm going to give you those 4 teams when we come back here in about 3 minutes.
Welcome back to the real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket, 1430 AM and 99.5 HD2.
The real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Just had Jared Dubin join me. He was awesome, as he always is. Zach Pereles of CBS Sports is set to join me top of the hour, 11 o'clock, here in about 12 minutes or so. Now, football season, it's almost here. Cannot wait. Okay, the cold weather is upon us. All right, I know you're ready for football season. I know I'm ready for football season. Thank you for tuning in to the real Jonathan Smith Show, no matter how you're tuning in, whether that's on Twitter, follow me there at __ Jonathan Smith. You can also head over to YouTube, subscribe to Indy's Sports Ticket, and you can check us out there as well. Join the chat, join the conversation, all of those great things. Or you can download the Indy Sports Ticket app, so you can also stream the Dan Dockett Show. Now, every year, 7 teams that did not make the playoffs the previous year make the playoffs the next year, right? So half the field, half of the playoff teams change every single year. And it's an interesting thing. I always try to identify who those 7 teams are. I try to figure out the teams that are going to be better, who are the teams that are going to be worse. And with that being said, I've got a list here of 4 teams that I think are going to regress this season in the NFL. Okay. And this all, initiated because I was thinking about the Colts joint practice yesterday, how things didn't go perfectly for the Indianapolis Colts. But I think the Colts should, not feel terrible about it because they played against the Bengals, the team that's going to win the AFC North so long as Joe Burrow can stay healthy. Okay, the Bengals have a good roster. The Steelers aren't going to be good. That's a team that won 10 games last year that's going to regress. The Browns, they have Deshaun Watson. Who cares about the Browns? Okay, and the Ravens, who went 14-3 last year, number 1 seed in the AFC, guess what? They're also going to regress last year, and that is the first team that I have here on my NFL teams that are going to regress list. Now, yesterday, I talked a little bit about turnover margin. I talked about how I liked for the Commanders to hit their over on their win total of 6.5 games because they were last in turnover differential last year. Turnovers are a luck stat. The Commanders won't be that unlucky again, okay, meaning that their win total should go up. And when you go back over the past decade, this is what we see. Teams that are last in turnover margin have much improved years the second year, and their wins go up by 2, 3, or 4 wins. So we can expect that from the Commanders. So bet that over 6.5 number. The opposite end of the spectrum is true. The Ravens led the NFL in turnover margin last year. Okay. They led the league in it. They aren't going to get that lucky again. Okay. They aren't. Teams aren't just going to give them turnovers at the same rate that they did last year. And so because of that, if you expect for this Ravens team to go 14-3, you're out of your mind. It's not going to happen. Now, the Ravens will still be good. They'll go 10-7, 11-6. They'll make the playoffs. Lamar Jackson may have another MVP type of season, but they're not going 14-3. The AFC playoffs aren't running through Baltimore. Okay, they are the first team on the list that I have to regress. I thought about betting their under, but it's set at 10.5. That's a tough line, so I wouldn't touch that one. But the Ravens will be worse this year. Look at them going 11-6 or 10-7. Okay, so the turnover margin, that's part of why I have them taking a step back. But their defensive coordinator, Mike McDonald, he's gone. He's now the head coach of the Seahawks. If you didn't know this, bad coordinators don't get head coaching jobs. Okay, so that is a big loss for the Ravens. Jadeveon Clowney's gone. That's 9.5 sacks. Patrick Queen, one of the best interior linebackers in football, is gone. Okay, they also lost their starting right guard, who's been their starting right guard for the last 3 years. Like, they lost some key pieces. Sure, they're bringing in Derrick Henry, but they're going to be worse. Other teams that I can see regressing include the Steelers. They went 10-7 last year. Everyone loves to talk about how Mike Tomlin's never had a losing season. Well, that's going to change this year. They're going to go 8-9, 7-10. I know that their defense is good. Their defense is going to keep them in games. But when your quarterback situation is that dire, then it's hard to think that you're going to improve after winning 10 games the previous season. Okay, so expect for the Steelers to take a step back. Expect for the Ravens to take a step back. The Eagles in the NFC now, they are going to regress. I know they have new coordinators. Okay, new coordinators always get fan bases excited, but it all starts at the top. And all accounts point to Nick Sirianni not being a good head coach. Okay, they all point to players in that building not really liking him. Okay, and let's be honest, the Eagles got lucky last year. They went 7-3 in one-score games. That is abnormally good. Listen to this. The Eagles outscored their opposition by an average of 0.3 points per game. When you look at, their average points scored versus their average points allowed, the difference is 0.3. If we take the 73 teams from 1989 to 2022 that outscored the teams they played by an average between 0 and 1 points per game and see how they performed, only 11 of those teams produced double-digit win totals. Okay, and unsurprisingly, the teams that did that were 74-25 and one-score games that season. And also, unsurprisingly, they went 40-43 in those same contests the next following season. The Eagles aren't going to be that good in close games again. It's just not going to happen. When we look at their roster, sure, they bring in Saquon Barkley, but I just don't think that that's moving the needle enough for them to be any better. Okay, and also, they were really bad to finish the year last year. And then the last team on the list, I said this team wasn't going to make the playoffs. I'm standing by it. The San Francisco 49ers, they had incredibly good injury luck last season. They're older, right? More 30-year-olds on their roster than any other team in the league. Their left tackle's 35. Christian McCaffrey, back-to-back 300-touch seasons. He's going to get hurt this year. Deebo Samuel gets hurt every year. George Kittle usually gets hurt. He was pretty healthy last year. Okay, they are due for injuries, and that's going to cost them, not only to, have a bad season, but they aren't going to make the playoffs. Those are the four teams that I have regressing this year in the NFL: Ravens, Steelers, Eagles, and 49ers. That's it. Those are the four teams that are going to take a step back. When we come back here in about 5 minutes, Zach Pereles of CBS Sports is set to join me. He's been at Commanders camp, so we're going to talk about my Commanders over 6.5 take and other things going on in the NFL world, and a bit of Caitlin Clark as well. That's coming your way here in 5 minutes.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for...
It's the Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket, 1430 AM and 99.5 HD2.
Well, what's going on? It's the Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Hope you guys are having just a great Wednesday. This week's moving, man. It doesn't feel like today should be Wednesday. We got Colts football tomorrow night. We are on the cusp. We are so incredibly close to football season. I had to wear a hoodie to work today. I had to wear one last night when I was out and about. Football weather is here. We just need the football to show up. And speaking of showing up, Zach Pereles always does, writes for CBS Sports, does a great job. He's in D.C. at Commanders Camp today. Zach, what's going on, man?
How's it going? Another day closer to regular season football. And like you said, even preseason football wrapping up.
Yeah, I mean, Colts play tomorrow night. They're playing their starters, so that'll be fun to watch. And you're the perfect guy for me to have on today. And I was so excited when you said yes, because I had this take that I gave. And, you know, you've been at Commanders Camp for most of training camp, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So I am a big believer in betting the Commanders to win over 6.5 games. You've been at Commanders Camp. How do they look? What have you kind of seen so far? And do you kind of agree with that potentially hitting the over?
Yeah, I think that the biggest, most positive sign is obviously Jaden Daniels. Like, I've been at Commanders Camp for a couple years now. This is by far the most crisp the passing attack has looked. I think, Jahan Dotson and Terry McLaurin have really talked about how it's not so much how accurate he is, but the fact that he's accurate to a level of, like, I'm throwing the ball where you can get yards after the catch, or I'm throwing a ball where only you can get it, and it's either going to be a completion or an incompletion. There's no chance for a turnover. So he's looked really good. I think that things are going to continue to come along on the defense. It's just a lot of moving pieces on that side of the ball. They have a lot of new faces, and even on the offense, a lot of new faces. But really on that defense, the edge rushers are completely new. It's a new linebacking core. They've got a new safety in there in Jeremy Chin. So it's a lot of newness. But I think, that 6.5 number, like, I feel like Vegas always knows. I think that the big thing for them is, can they put Jaden Daniels in positions to succeed? The offensive line is still a question mark. Can he get the ball out quickly? He's a guy who sometimes likes to hold on to the ball and take those deep shots. But this preseason, he's looked really good, and the accuracy just stands out so much on those short throws. Oh man, 6.5 is a tough one. I feel like 9 is the ceiling, 5 is probably the floor. So let's go right in the middle there and go 7 and take the over.
So my big thing, once again, joined by Zach Pereles of CBS Sports. So look, I'm a bit of a nerd on this stuff. The Commanders were last in turnover margin last year, right? Which is, look, turnovers for the most part are a luck stat, especially in the NFL where quarterbacks tend to kind of know what they're doing. I feel like turnovers in the NFL are like, did the defensive end, was his arm long enough to hit the ball on accident when he was making the tackle? You know what I mean? And so, like, turnovers, it's a pretty luck-based stat. The Commanders were the worst at it last year. And when you go back, over the past decade, every team that's last in turnover margin sees a significant improvement the following year, right? So the Colts were last in 2022. They went 4-12. And then last year, they go 9-8. 2 years ago, the Jaguars were last in turnover margin. And then the following year, instead of going 3-14, they went 9-8. And so we see this we see these leaps in improvement just because they're not so unlucky. So that's why I like the number. And hearing you say that Jaden Daniels looks good, and I like Dan Quinn. I thought he did a good job in Dallas on the defensive side of the ball. You highlighted some of their new pieces on defense. So hearing you say all these things about how good they've looked during camp makes me feel way better.
Yeah, and I think another big thing that's important to talk about, and it kind of happened with the Colts last year too, when you talk about going from worst to, not worst, I guess, is there's a new coaching staff there. And you mentioned Dan Quinn, but last year under Eric Bieniemy, the Commanders threw the ball at a higher rate than any other team. And obviously it didn't help that they were trailing a lot, but they threw it when it was a game neutral script and the game was close. They, Eric Bieniemy, just a lot of throws all the time. And that's going to lead to more turnovers. I think that Cliff Kingsbury's done a better job installing the run game early in camp. Sam Cosmi, who's probably their best offensive lineman, talked about how he's so excited to run the ball more. Brian Robinson Jr.'s look good. Austin Eckler's look good, and he's definitely going to have a role. I still think Brian Robinson is going to be the lead guy there, but Eckler obviously brings a lot in the pass, that short passing game, and especially in protection as well. So yeah, when you think about, obviously, like, you're throwing the ball a little bit less and you're just going to have a better quarterback in Jaden Daniels, that's going to limit the turnovers on offense. And then, yeah, like Dan Quinn's Dallas units, like, they thrived on creating havoc, kind of going all over the place, presenting a lot of different looks. And they created big plays. You talk about like Deron Bland last year with the most pick sixes in NFL history. Dallas wasn't always so great on a down-to-down basis defensively, but when they created plays, they completely flipped games, and that's what made them so good. So I definitely think, obviously, the luck is involved, but also just like a lot of teams before, like, turnovers lose you games, and then losing games often means coaches lose their jobs. A new staff comes in, and that also helps turn the turnover luck around. So I think that you're exactly right there. Jaden Daniels isn't going to turn the ball over as much. They're going to run the ball more, which naturally leads to fewer turnovers. And I think the defense will make more plays than they did last year. It's a much more like communicative unit. You saw so many busts on the back end by the Commanders defense, and you've just heard about guys talking about how much better the communication is in the secondary. And they've, when you add a guy like Bobby Wagner, especially at the linebacker, that's a guy that's going to make sure everyone's in the right place.
Oh, no doubt. Once again, joined by Zach Pereles of CBS Sports. So you've mentioned, we talked about Jaden Daniels a lot, which is awesome, because when I watch national coverage of things, obviously there's a lot of stuff on Caleb Williams, Hard Knocks, helps with that, obviously, that, and he's the number 1 overall pick. Bo Nix has looked really good during these preseason games, and people, including me, are falling in love with the Broncos because of that. Over 5.5, just saying, that feels like free money to me. There's been a lot of talk about Drake May in New England because he hasn't played very well. Meanwhile, Jaden Daniels is the number 2 overall pick. He was really good at LSU last year. Like, this is a guy who's won the Heisman. He's played really well in the preseason, but it feels like no one's really talking about him. Do you feel that way? And I think that should change. How do you kind of feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough for me because I feel like people talk about him every day when I go to camp. But yeah, you're right. It's a little weird just because I think that the Commanders finally have like some sense of stability. And I'm actually going to have a piece up about this either this week or next week. Like, last year was obviously the new owner takeover with Josh Harris, but he didn't even technically take over the team until the end of July. So it's like all these things that should have been done in March and April, like position coaches and stuff, those weren't even formally announced until like the beginning of September, like several months later. So Josh Harris didn't really get the chance to make an imprint on the team from the start, and there were so many moving parts. I think that this year you just want to see normalcy. Like, you just want to see like Dan Quinn establish a team that's respectable on the field. Obviously, Josh Harris is going to help establish a franchise that's respectable off the field, which was not the case under Dan Snyder. So maybe it's just a little bit like, how about they're normal? How about they have a 7-win season or an 8, however many wins? It doesn't even matter as much, in my opinion. Obviously, the wins are nice, but maybe that's why there's not quite as much coverage, because they just want a normal season. They want Jaden Daniels to stay healthy and show flashes. They want the defense to improve. They have so many moving parts. They had 5 top 100 picks, so there's going to be some growing pains because all of those guys are going to play. They also brought in some veterans who are, they're kind of short-term guys that are just trying to help establish a standard here. you've heard a lot about just kind of establishing like a culture for this team. And for so long, they couldn't establish a culture because of all the things that were going on with the owner and just all the things that seemed to go on in Washington. But I just think like maybe a small reason that he's not getting talked about as much is it's okay for the Commanders to be normal. It's okay for them to turn in a season where you see a lot of progress from Jaden Daniels and the other rookies. Hopefully you get some nice seasons from veterans like Zach Ertz and Bobby Wagner, and they just kind of fall in line and you can look forward to, an exciting future and things are just normal. That's been a thing that hasn't been a thing for decades.
Yeah, you're exactly right. It's just like you said, like it just seems like there's always something extra around the Commanders, and a normal season for them would be really, really nice. Once again, joined by Zach Pereles of CBS Sports. So I've been keeping up with your newsletter. You had some stuff in there earlier this week on the Steelers quarterback situation. So I had a list earlier on NFL teams that I expect to regress from last year. I had the Steelers on the list because of this quarterback situation and just how dire it is. What do you think they're going to wind up doing in Pittsburgh about Justin Fields and Russell Wilson?
Yeah, I mean, I think my favorite saying regarding quarterbacks is if you have two quarterbacks, you don't have any quarterbacks. Like, it's bad that here we are, 2.5 weeks ahead of the season opener, and neither guy has separated himself. We talk about Russell Wilson, who was hurt at the beginning, and that gave Justin Fields a chance, and then Russell Wilson comes back and does not look very good. That offensive line is banged up and hasn't looked great, so that doesn't help either candidate, but it certainly doesn't help Wilson, who's trying to, make a transition to another new offense and just isn't quite the athlete that Fields is. And then you see Justin Fields and you say, oh my God, how is he not the starter if you just watch his highlights? And then you watch the lowlights and you're like, how is this guy even being considered for a starting position? So it's a mess, to be honest. Like, you would think that I think the Steelers went into this season thinking if we can just get some level of competent quarterback play, we have had such a high floor for a long time. And maybe if our ceiling doesn't raise that much with a Russell Wilson, maybe even he can raise our floor even a little bit more, make us a legit playoff team. This is a team that hasn't had a losing season under Mike Tomlin, but they also haven't won a playoff game in, I think since 2017. So I just am, the more days that go by without a starter, the more worried I get. Like, what is going to be the plan here? I still think it's going to be Russell Wilson, just because I think that his floor is a little bit higher, and the Steelers, just with great coaching and a defense that somehow puts it together year after year, and they're going to trust that floor a little bit. But it's never exciting when you're talking about the guy raising your floor. Like, at some point you want your ceiling to be raised, and we know how long the Steelers have had this really high floor. It's just like every day I just think we're a day closer to the season and they don't know what they're doing.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Once again, joined by Zach Pereles of CBS Sports. I've been thinking about this, and you talk about raising the floor, which isn't the most exciting thing in the world, but it's fun sometimes to watch your team and at least feel like they're competent. So I don't know. There's a free agent out there who had some success under Arthur Smith in Tennessee. His name's Ryan Tannehill. He's 34. It's not like this dude's super old. Any world where they go out and maybe try and bring him in to play quarterback instead of Russell Wilson and Justin Fields?
It's funny. Like, you kind of think about it and you're like, yeah, this is the right fit. But Ryan Tannehill has had suitors for a while, and I don't think that he would come in 2 weeks before the season. I also think, when the Steelers went with this plan at quarterback, they kind of knew that they were getting guys who have faced really big challenges over the past couple of years. Like, Justin Fields went from highly regarded, hope for the future in Chicago, and then he ended up being dumped kind of unceremoniously. And people were like, how did the Bears only get this for Justin Fields? Well, that's what the NFL thought of him. That's a that's a humbling thing when you're only worth a late round pick. And that's, that's what the NFL thought of him. If the Bears got a better offer, they would have taken it. And then Russell Wilson obviously he was a franchise pillar in Seattle, and now he's on another team. This is going to be his third team in 4 years. I just think it's tough to manage the mentality of those guys. Like, it would be really tough to have Ryan Tannehill come in 2 weeks, before the season. And I get that he has familiarity, but he has not been a good quarterback over the past couple years. And I think that would just throw such a huge wrench into all of their plans, what they've been doing this entire offseason. I know that it's sometimes hard to remember because we're not in the buildings, but these guys go through so much tape and so many plans and talk to so many people. They know they know every single aspect of Justin Fields and Russell Wilson and the dynamic that they have, the dynamic that it would create if they brought another guy in there. So I don't think that's going to happen unless we see an injury or something. And I also don't think Ryan Tannehill wants to go somewhere where he'd probably be the third quarterback and he still have to play his way into shape. And I just think for now, the Steelers, I think right now with two quarterbacks have enough on their hands.
Fair enough. Once again, joined by Zach Pereles of CBS Sports. Zach, are you a college football fan?
I absolutely am, and I've spent way too much time playing with video games.
Dude, don't get me started. Thankfully, I bought a book that I really like, and that has decreased my screen time a bit. But yeah, I'm, the UNLV running Rebels, baby. We are now back-to-back-to-back champs, and it's a great feeling. So, conference realignment and the new playoff. It's the first year that we, have it on this level, 12-team playoff, really only 4 power conferences. The college football purist probably doesn't like it. I do. I just think the games are going to be better. I don't like the expanded playoff, though, so I'm kind of on the fence with it. How do you feel about conference realignment, and what are your thoughts on the expanded playoff?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm kind of similar to where you are in that, like, I understand that people aren't excited about it and people aren't thrilled to watch like USC go travel to Rutgers on like a Tuesday night or something. But I do really think that you kind of hit the nail on the head, and I think that there are going to be a lot more good games. And that's something that's really fun to look forward to. Like, they're going to be cannot miss games all throughout the season. Like, everyone's schedule has been bolstered to some degree. And you just look around the country, and I think that that's good for the game. The loss of some of those traditional rivalries is a bummer, though. Like, there's no disputing that. And whether those rivalries are lost this year or going to be lost, in the coming years, that's kind of tough. But I agree with you. Like, I think that it creates a more fun and really like interesting week to week dynamic. You get fewer weeks where you kind of get the week off, or you play a team that isn't maybe one of those trap games that we talked about. Like, you can't afford to have trap games.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, with the expanded playoff, I like that because it shouldn't feel like there's no margin for error. Like we talked about, I thought last year Florida State being left out, and I don't want to open up the whole can of worms, but they won all their games. Like, the fact that they couldn't compete, and obviously we've seen that with group of 5 teams as well. Like, they win all their games. Why can't they at least have a chance? Is something that I'm really looking forward to with the expanded playoff. I think it's really cool that they're going to be home games. That's like an inherent advantage. And, some people are like, well, now we're just letting so many teams in. Compared to, a lot of other sports, we're not letting so many teams in. Out of 134, we're letting in 12. You look at the other sports landscapes, and the NBA lets half of its teams in. The NFL lets, at this point, 14 of 32. Even college basketball lets in, about 20% of its teams into the playoffs, or I guess March Madness. So I think that it's really nice to like let's say a quarterback is injured for a game, you lose, that shouldn't be the end of your season. And it shouldn't even really be a debate if it's the end of your season. So I'm excited that there's going to be chances for teams to like impress. And if they lose a game, they can get right back in it. That's kind of the beauty of getting a chance to go do something in the playoffs. And if you're the 11th seed and you're happy that you sneak in, it's not one of these things where we're going to get really bad teams in the playoff. We're going to get really, really good teams, really good games. And you can be a really good team that deserves a chance to go, have a chance to play for a championship. And you're going to have to go through the nation's truly elite teams, including some on the road. I think that that's a good change. And it was probably overdue. I think we went from 2 to 4. There used to not even be a national championship game. Then we get to, BCS with 2, the college football playoff with 4. I just think like we're still letting less than 10% of the country's teams in. And I think that that's fine. I think that what they've done makes sense. It's going to add to, you play in a brutal Big Ten or you have a brutal non-conference schedule and you're, like Michigan is looking at a really tough, that could be a team that's right on the edge of the playoff and they post, 2 impressive wins and 1 tight loss and 1 blowout loss. And then does that team deserve a chance? I think that's going to be really, really fun and worthwhile talking about. And we're finally getting those chances to talk about that.
Yeah, I'm interested to see how it goes. Joined by Zach Pereles of CBS Sports, talking a little college football. I like the conference realignment. I think the games are going to be better. I think 12 teams is too many. I know that we talk about the NFL and they let in so many and all that, but I think that the gap between the best team in the NFL and the worst team is closer than the best team in college football and the 12th best team in college football. I would have been a bigger proponent of the playoff being expanded to 6 or 8 teams. I think 12 is just a few too many. But at the same time, for our profession, it's great because I'll argue over 2 9-3 teams, which team should be the 12th seed. That's fine with me. That honestly sounds like a whole lot of fun, but we'll see how it goes. Zach, thanks for your time, man. I know you got to run because you've got Commanders training camp. Thanks for your time, man.
Thanks so much for having me. Appreciate it as always.
You got it. That is Zach Pereles of CBS Sports. You can head over to cbssports.com and read all of his stuff there. Great writer. He's got a newsletter as well. That's really good. If you just want a quick hit of all the major stories going on in sports, Zach is your guy for that. When we come back here in 4 minutes, speaking of college football, I've got a Big Ten Conference football preview coming your way here in 4 minutes.
The best takes, stories, and entertainment. It's The Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Tickets, 1430 AM and 99.5 HD2.
The Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Big Ten football right around the corner. Week 0 is on Saturday. Can't wait for it. Should be good. Should be fun. Can't wait to watch Colorado play North Dakota State week 1, 2 weeks from Saturday. Or a week from Saturday, excuse me. And yeah, I can't wait because I think North Dakota State's going to run Colorado out of the building, and it's going to be great. But I'm not here to talk about the Big 12. I'm going to talk about the Big 10. Big 10 football preview. IU over 5.5. That's a lock. Okay, their schedule is softer than a brand new pillow. Everyone that talks about Kurt Cignetti seems to really like him. Okay, everything coming out of Bloomington is he's organized and practices look good and yada, yada, yada. And let's be honest, 6 wins isn't that many, especially when your schedule is as easy as Indiana's is. So if you're going to bet anything for the Big Ten, bet that. Bet IU to win over 5.5 games. I'm excited for IU football. 8 home games, so plenty of opportunities to go down there to Bloomington, tailgate, and hopefully watch them win some football games. It'd be great. It would be awesome, okay? Because I want people around here to care about college football because I love college football, okay? And the people as a whole love college football. Ticket sales for college football this year up 42% according to StubHub. So people are excited for the season, okay? People are excited for conference realignment. People are excited for an expanded playoff, okay? So cannot wait for that. Here's my thing about the Big Ten. I think that it's pretty clear cut that Ohio State and Oregon are a lot better than everyone else. Okay, that's just the way that it feels. Both teams recruit, the high school world extremely well. Both teams recruit the transfer portal extremely well. Both teams have great head coaches. Dan Lanning is quickly becoming one of the best coaches in the sport of college football. Even though Ryan Day hasn't won or until he does, he's still one of the best coaches in college football. There are only 3 coaches in college football right now that are active that have won a national title. Kirby Smart, Dabo Swinney, Mac Brown, who won his at Texas, but he's obviously at North Carolina now. Okay, so, there's a lot of newness in college football. New conference realignment, new coaches kind of rising to the top. Okay, Ohio State obviously hiring Chip Kelly as their offensive coordinator. Both of those teams, coach-wise and roster-wise, are loaded. Okay, both of those teams are going to compete for national titles this year. And if I had to make a bet today on who I thought was going to win the college football playoff, I would put it on Ohio State. They have the best roster in the country. Ryan Day is a great head coach. I don't care if he couldn't beat Jim Harbaugh. Okay, once Jim Harbaugh got things rolling at Michigan, there weren't a lot of people out there who could beat him once he got that program rolling. Okay, so love the Big Ten this year. I think it's going to be fascinating. But while there's a lot of attention on Ohio State and Oregon, there's no attention on USC, who I think is going to be a lot better than people think. Okay, I was on FanDuel looking at over-unders. The USC over-under is set at 7.5. Take the over. Okay, definitely take IU over 5.5 wins. I really like USC over 7.5. There's always one thing that's going to reign true in college football. This one thing will always be true. Whoever is coached by Lincoln Riley is going to score a buttload of points. Okay, I've been reading up on what people think about the Big Ten, and there's this idea that the USC offense is going to take a step back. What are you talking about? That's not going to happen. It's like, well, they lost Caleb Williams, the number 1 overall pick in the draft. Who cares? Lincoln Riley scored points at Oklahoma with Jalen Hurts as his quarterback. He scored points at Oklahoma with Baker Mayfield as his quarterback. He scored points at Oklahoma with Jalen Hurts as his quarterback. Okay? He scored points at Oklahoma with Caleb Williams as his quarterback. It doesn't matter who Lincoln Riley is coaching at quarterback. They're going to score a boatload of points. That's just who USC is now because they hired Lincoln Riley. Okay, and that's the thing about college football. When we watch professional sports, the NBA, the NFL, very much about players.
It's very, very much about players because players sign 4 or 5-year contracts and they're on your TV playing in your city for 5 years or however long it winds up being. That's not the case with college sports, right? Guys are there 1 year, gone the next. Guys are transferring in and out. You're bringing in new freshmen, and it's an absolute mess. The one thing that remains true at these schools is the coach. Okay, that's the one thing that is continuous. Okay, unless your head coach retires. Right? So as long as USC has, Lincoln Riley on their payroll, I'm betting on that team to score points and win football games. They've got a relatively tough schedule, but there's no reason why they couldn't go 8-4, 9-3 because they are so offensively powerful. They're going to beat teams that they shouldn't just because they're going to score 68 points and the other team's only going to be able to score 50. Okay, that's going to happen this year because Lincoln Riley is that good of a head coach. So when it comes to the Big Ten, expect for Ohio State and Oregon to run the table. They play each other this year in Eugene. Okay, so that game's going to be fun to watch. But watch out for USC, man. They're going to upset some teams, and I really just can't wait to see it. And as I continue to look at the Big Ten, I am reminded as to why I don't like the 12-team playoff. It's just too many teams, man. Too many teams. And while the games are good this year, I think it's going to change down the road. The conference games will continue to be impressive. But if I was a schedule maker in college football, okay, and I was in the Big Ten, we're going to play our 9 conference games, and the 3 games that are out of conference that we get to choose, we're playing a bunch of cupcakes. We're playing nobody. Okay, because in this new world of college football, if you go 3-0 in your non-conference games against who cares State and who cares Tech, that's 3 wins on the board. And then you enter conference play in the Big Ten and you go 7-2. You finish the year at 10-2 with only 2 losses as a Power 5 school. Guess what? You're going to make the playoff. And if you don't believe me, look at the Big Ten this year. The Big Ten is going to get at least 3 teams in the playoff and potentially a 4th. Okay, Ohio State's going to make the playoff. Oregon's going to make the playoff. Penn State's going to make the playoff. And Penn State making the playoff, it's going to make me so upset. I'm going to lose my cool. Okay, because I can't stand Penn State. They do the exact same thing every year. They come into the season. They're ranked really high to start the year. They're ranked 9th to start the year this year. Excuse me. They're ranked 8th. Michigan is ranked 9th, which means that they're viewed as a playoff team. Okay, if you're ranked in the top 12, that tells me that, the coaches poll and the media poll, they view you as a playoff team. So Penn State's going to start the year ranked 8th. They're going to go 10-2 at worst because they play nobody. They have 2 tough games on their schedule, USC and Ohio State. That's it. I think they'll probably go 10-2, 11-1. And at the end of the year, they're going to have 0 impressive wins. But the College Football Playoff Committee is going to be like, they're 10-2 and they're coming out of the Big Ten. Like, we kind of have to put them in, don't we? Which is just going to really, really upset me. Okay? And look, and if I was in the SEC, I would do the exact same thing. Like, I'm a Arkansas Razorback fan, for those of you who don't know. They're playing Oklahoma State this year, week 2. Don't know why they did that. Well, no, I do know why they did that. They were making their schedule to appeal to a 14 playoff, right? Because you make your schedule, your non-conference games, years in advance. So, they're going to play Oklahoma State. And anyway, but like if I was Arkansas or Ole Miss or Alabama even, right? And I was in the SEC, you know what I would do? 4 easy non-conference games, go 6-2 in conference, go 10-2 and make the playoff, because a 10-2 team from the SEC is going to make the playoff every single year. Okay, and a 10-2 team from the Big Ten is going to make the playoff every single year. Doesn't matter who you beat, doesn't matter who you lose to. Okay, because we can sit here and we can, talk about the committee and how they usually, watch, all the games, and, they want to grade the best team. And we've seen them do it once. We've seen them once in their history, the College Football Playoff Committee. We've seen them one time in their history put in a team with the worst record, and that was last year when they put Alabama in over Florida State. Okay, they've done it once. Usually, They just look at records and they go, oh, you went undefeated. Here you go. Here's a spot. Oh, you went 11-1. Here you go. Here's a spot. That's usually how they operate. And I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. So while the conference games are going to be better, the non-conference games, I think, are going to slowly but surely, over the course of time, continue to get worse. The Real Jonathan Smith Show, Indy's Sports Ticket. When we come back here in 4 minutes, Colts had training camp against the Bengals yesterday. They're playing against the Bengals tomorrow. I'm giving you expectations on what we should see tomorrow and how yesterday went. That's coming your way here in 4 minutes on The Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy's Sports Ticket.
Unadulterated sports talk with unfiltered takes. It's the Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Tickets, 1430 AM and 99.5 HD2.
The Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Hope you guys are having a beautiful, beautiful Wednesday. Hey, Mike. Guess what day it is, Mike? Hump day. It's hump day. I love that commercial. I miss that commercial. What happened to all the good commercials? I guess they just save them all for the Super Bowl now, but I really miss watching TV and seeing a good old-fashioned commercial that makes me laugh a little bit. I miss the Bud Light night. I'm getting way off track here, but seriously, I miss good commercials. We don't have enough of them anymore. Okay, every commercial I see now was so serious. Okay, I miss the funny ones that get me going. Seriously. Anyway, Colts Bengals joint practice happened yesterday. Okay, heard some mixed reviews. I've heard that the Colts offense looked bad. I heard that the Colts defense looked bad, and then I heard that it actually looked pretty good. Heard a lot. Ken Sterling is joining the Dan Dockett Show coming up today at 2:00, and so we'll get an accurate report of everything that happened over in Cincinnati. Colts playing the Bengals tomorrow night. I believe that game is at 8:00. Starters set to play a quarter and a half. Going to get into that here in a couple minutes, but I want to start with the reports coming out of the joint practice yesterday. Joe Burrow, 26 of 32 with 2 touchdowns and an interception. We know Ronnie Harrison had 1 interception. There's been reports that Jalen Jones had 2, but he may have been out of bounds on them. So it seems like Jalen Jones had a pretty decent day. Seems like Joe Burrow had a pretty efficient day as well at 26 for 32. That's all the numbers. So that's 7 on 7. That's 11 on 11. That's 1 on 1. So that's every little bit of passing that they did. And I got to be honest, when I saw that number, I became very concerned. I was like, here we go. More negative stuff on this crappy secondary. But I continued to read and I continued to see reports. 11 on 11 stuff. It seems like the Colts held their own, which makes sense, right? When you think about how atrocious this Colts defense is, or this Colts secondary is, they should struggle in one-on-ones. They should struggle in 7-on-7 because the strength of the defense isn't on the field. Okay, when the defensive line was on the field, it seems like they fared much better against this Bengals team. The defense kept the Bengals' first-team offense out of the end zone in 11 on 11. Okay, and they did an entire red zone period where all they did was run red zone stuff. And guess what? The Bengals did not score a touchdown in 11 on 11. That is, to me, a great sign. That is some of the best news that we have heard about this Colts defense all training camp, right? Because let's be honest. I don't know about you, but me, I was nervous. Going into this, I was like, man, this secondary is about to get lit up by Joe Burrow. And in 7-on-7 and 1-on-1s, they did. But when the defensive line was on the field, the thing that is supposed to help this Colts team, the thing that is supposed to tip, kind of the scales in their favor when it comes to them playing defense, when that defensive line was on the field, the Colts defense was much more productive. So hopefully that is something that rings true throughout the regular season as well, right? Where this defensive line is dominant and they just send in waves upon waves of pass rushers to kind of help disrupt everything that's going on for the offense with whoever they're playing against. Okay, they also did a 2-minute drill stuff to close practice. The Bengals didn't score, and the Colts converted a field goal. This is one of 2 positive things I heard about the Colts when it comes to their offense. Apparently the offense really kind of struggled a bit yesterday. Apparently they had 1 good drive in 11 on 11s where they picked up a couple first downs, but that was really it. Hearing that, they were able to get a field goal in 2-minute drills, is that the best news in the world? No. But it tells me that Anthony Richardson had some success when the Bengals defense was expecting for him to throw the football, right? He was still able to make some throws. So we'll see. I'm scraping the bottom of the barrel here for positivity. But that's okay. Some days you have good practices. Other days you have bad ones. If the Colts play well tomorrow night, I don't think we're going to care about how bad this practice was, right? That's just the way that things work. Something that we will continue to care about, though, and something that I'm going to continue to monitor as we head into the season is that safety position, right? We know Julian Blackmon is going to play one of the spots, and there's questions about the other. And, Nick Cross played some strong safety in the second preseason game. And, Shane Steichen was asked about potentially flipping the two. He was asked about it again yesterday after practice. Here's what Colts head coach Shane Steichen had to say about playing Nick Cross or any of the other safeties at strong safety as opposed to free.
Yeah, I mean, we're looking at all those things. That rotation back there with those guys, Nick Cross and Rodney and Ronnie and Trevor Denbo and Julian. I mean, we're looking at all that stuff right now. And like I said, the guy that makes the most plays here, we got another week and a half, before we start this thing off. And we'll make that decision when the time needs to be made.
Shane Steichen talking about who's going to play safety. He said that they're going to, make a decision at the time that a decision needs to be made. Yeah, that's a bunch of bull crap. They know who's playing. Okay, we're about 2.5 weeks out from the start of the season. They know who's going to play. Okay, they just aren't telling anybody yet, and they shouldn't tell anybody yet, right? Keep that stuff, locked in until you have to tell people. Okay, so I get it, but look, this is what I think is going to happen. My official prediction is Nick Cross is going to be the other safety alongside Julian Blackmon, but they're going to flip him. Okay, I don't think that they trust Nick Cross enough to play free safety. And I do think that they trust Julian Blackmon enough to do that. They also drafted Nick Cross as a strong safety, right? So he's probably going to be a little more comfortable there. He looked really good in the second preseason game playing strong safety. He tackled really well in the open field. Like it was impressive to watch. So Nick Cross is going to primarily play strong safety this year while Julian Blackmon plays free safety based on how they've divided reps and all those things. That is what I'm expecting for them to do. And look, I'm not excited about Nick Cross. I don't think you're excited about Nick Cross. But you know who is? EJ Speed. He was asked about the battle at the safety position, and here's what Colts linebacker EJ Speed had to say about it.
Nick made some plays last game. I like how Nick playing. Ronnie, he's a seasoned vet. He plays well. I think we got depth at it as much as people think it's a problem. I think we got depth at it.
Between that statement right there, between EJ Speed thinking that the Colts have depth at the safety position and Anthony Edwards saying that basketball players in the 80s and 90s didn't have any skill, I think that's all the proof that we need to know that players don't always know what they're talking about. Okay, there is a major lack of depth at that safety position. And, that's why we keep talking about it, right? It's something that hasn't been fixed. It could have been fixed, but, throw in Justin Simmons, $10 million. But hey, man, what do I know? I'm just a radio guy, right? So we'll see what they wind up doing. I do think it's going to be Nick Cross, though. They're playing the starters tomorrow night for a quarter and a half. So we're going to have an idea of who they're kind of feeling out at that starting safety spot across from Julian Blackmon. Here's Shane Steichen talking about the starters playing on Thursday night.
Yeah, our starters will play about a quarter and a half, probably, give or take. I mean, some guys might play less, some guys might play more, but want to get those guys out there and run around on Thursday night.
You're going to see the third one now is kind of what the old third one was?
A little bit. I think this year kind of played out similar to last year for us as far as how it all worked out. We had a joint practice week 2 last year against Chicago, and then we had a joint practice against Arizona, and then we turn around and we have the Thursday night game again. You know what I mean? So after this Thursday night, we got 17 days until we kick off against Houston, and so this is a big day. So we got to get the players ready to roll and go out there and play and get that game-like experience before obviously week 1 gets here.
That was Shane Steichen talking about why he's playing guys in the third preseason game and how all that's kind of worked out and all that fun stuff. So Steichen there in the clip saying that they're going to play starters for a quarter and a half. I like it. I think that Anthony Richardson needs some more live reps underneath the lights on a real field without wearing the red "Don't Touch Me" jersey. And, so when I heard that, I wrote down some expectations. Like, I want to see the Colts offense do this, and I want to see the Colts defense do this. And then more news broke. The Bengals will not be playing their starters, according to Charlie Clifford, a Cincinnati reporter. So, look, it's the Colts 1s against the Bengals 2s. I need to see them dominate. I need to see them look like they're good enough to win the Super Bowl, because as good as I think that the Bengals are, okay, I think the Bengals are going to win the AFC North. As good as they are, their 2s should not be as good as the Colts 1s. Okay, I want to see the Colts offense on the same page. I want to see receivers create separation. I want to see Anthony Richardson throw the ball on time and on target. But most importantly, I want to see this offensive line for the Colts dominate. They're supposed to be good this year. That's what everybody keeps telling us. Okay? They're supposed to be awesome. They've played together for 3 years. That's supposed to help. When Anthony Richardson drops back to pass, I expect them to give him time to throw. When they turn around and they hand it off to Jonathan Taylor, I expect for them to generate a push because they're playing against backups. They're not playing against Hubbard and Hendrickson, two of the better defensive ends in the NFL. Okay? I need to see them dominate up front. Okay? And then defensively, I need to see that defensive line dominate. If they're playing against a second-string offensive line, they should have their way, especially with how great this group is supposed to be. Okay, because everyone, keeps telling us how great this defensive line is. And I think that it is. Okay, I think that this Colts defensive line is really good. But we have to wait and see, what this team looks like regular season, week 1, but in the final preseason game, when you're playing against backups and you're playing your starters, you need to look dominant. And that is what I expect to see from the Colts tomorrow night. Will we see it? I don't know. I really hope we do. But I do think that should be the expectation given the competition that they are about to play against. So, yeah, that's going to do it for the Real Jonathan Smith Show. I didn't get to everything today. I didn't get to talk about Anthony Edwards, and his comments saying that no one in the 80s and 90s had skill besides Michael Jordan. That's just absurd. Okay, I mean, Isaiah Thomas was a really good basketball player. He was a great basketball player, excuse me. Let me not be disrespectful to the great Isaiah Thomas. So it was Magic Johnson and Larry Bird. And, let me just list the plethora of guys that were great players. Okay, so Anthony Edwards, man, you said it yourself. You didn't watch, so I don't know why you're speaking on it. That's just one of those things that young people do. It's like, I didn't watch, but here's my opinion anyway. It's like, nah, man, you should have said, I didn't watch, and then you should have stopped. You should have said, I didn't watch the guys play back then, and then just stop talking. That's what should have happened. But the dude's like, he's younger than me, right? Which is kind of funny. So, yeah, Anthony Edwards, man. If you didn't watch, then probably don't speak on it. That's going to do it for the Real Jonathan Smith Show. Thanks for taking the time out of your day to tune in. I'll be back on the air tomorrow. Thursday, we got Colts football tomorrow night. Can't wait for it. We got the Dan Dockett Show coming up in 5 minutes here on Indy Sports Ticket. Thanks for tuning in. I will talk to you tomorrow from 10 to noon. Can't wait to get into all of it with you. I will talk to you then.
See website for details. Bill Sappin is not a lender and does not make credit decisions. Must be 18 years old. Not available in all states.
Honey, the credit card bill came and we're maxed out.
Great. Maxed out cards.